Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from EntitledParents. Story 1 is by HumbleStock5397. Mom sells my stuff to buy Christmas presents for Dad without using his money. Okay, so I have an entitled mom. She does things her way, and devil take the hindmost. But this story is really the first couple of times I realized that she's entitled. I'd been a novice guitar player, and while I enjoyed it, I wasn't a fast learner. Still, I had an acoustic guitar that I dearly loved. Then, one day, I didn't have an acoustic guitar. Why? Here's how my mom explained it. I hate to take Dad's money to buy him a Christmas present, so I sold your guitar. After all, you weren't using it. Yeah, right. I practiced every day except on days when my other passions, the Boy Scouts, comic books, etc., got in the way. I'd even been talking about starting a band and practicing in our basement. Do you begin to see another motive for selling my guitar when I wasn't looking? Not surprisingly, though it was a surprise to me at the time, she refused to replace my guitar when I told her I wanted it back. Another example, not quite so clear, but still, backstory. My dad served in the Navy in the Pacific during World War II, and as a souvenir, he brought back a Japanese army rifle, an Arisaka. Now, I knew, even as a teenager, that Dad didn't see land combat, so he must have bought the rifle from a Marine or soldier, but still, it was a rifle, and therefore, way cool. I'd started shooting targets while in the Scouts at summer camp, and I quickly realized I had a gift for that. I later went on to shoot on the college rifle team, so yeah, I was good. And as the only son, I figured the rifle would be mine when I turned 18. But no, one day I found the rifle gone. And yeah, my mom sold it to buy Dad a Christmas present, but not with his money. She didn't work out of the home, so earned no money of her own. One final story about my entitled mom. When I went off to college, I did two things. I bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder. At the time, this was state-of-the-art, and copied all of my extensive collection of records onto tape because they were easier to store in a dorm room. I left my albums at home, but I had not abandoned them until my mom sold them without asking. And these things I bought myself. There wasn't even the excuse that, I bought you your guitar, so it's mine to sell if I want. When I found this out, I went ballistic. Then a horrific thought hit me, and I raced up to my room, and my comic book collection was gone. You're too old to collect comics, she explained, then again noted that this was the only way she could afford to buy Dad a birthday present without using his money. Now sure, these were well-read comics, but still, I had the first and the first 100 or so Fantastic Four comics, the first 100 or so Spider-Man comics. The first, well, you get the picture. Even well-read comics, if they date back to the origins of Marvel as a comic powerhouse during the Stan Lee's and Jack Kirby days, are worth thousands of dollars or more, but only if you actually still own them. Sigh. Did I mention that my mom died a multimillionaire, but she made sure that us kids got nothing? Most of her estate went to St. Jude's, a good charity. But with her wealth, sharing even a small percentage of that wealth would have still left St. Jude's with many millions. But, as the song goes, and she's buying her way to heaven, or so it seems to me. It's so awful to give somebody a gift and then take it and sell it because you assumed they weren't using it. You don't have cameras watching these people 24/7. How do you even know that they're not using it anymore? And the comic book thing? That's terrible. Those things years down the road are worth so much money if you collect them. He had some of the first ones. She obviously knew that those things were worth money. That's why she took them and sold them. But she thinks they're for kids, so she can just do what she wants. Our next story is by Letowin. Entitled Parents Leave Child at Church for Free Babysitting. I read another story recently that reminded me of this incident, which took place in the early 2000s. I was working at a large church, 2,000 plus members, and on Sundays I ran the audio and video booth. We had 3 services, a 7 a.m. early service, the main service at 10 a.m., and a late service at 10:30 a.m. Each service ran for about an hour and 15 minutes. One Sunday during the 10 a.m. service, the pastor's wife went into labor 3 weeks early. The pastor left in the middle of his sermon and the youth pastor took over. The youth pastor did a great job of taking over and wishing the mother and baby well, and that the service wrapped up early. We had a quick meeting to decide what to do about the 10:30 service, and the youth pastor volunteered to give a sermon he had prepared for a youth group later in the week. It was his first time giving a sermon in front of that many people up on the big stage. He was nervous and rolled through it quickly and then forgot about the closing songs, so church ended at 12:15 instead of the normal 12:45. Everyone had cleared out of church by 12:30-ish. I shut down all the equipment and turned out all the lights and went down the hall to make sure the lights were out in the classrooms like I normally did. One light was on, and I found Kay, another church employee who worked in the nursery on Sundays. She was sitting in a rocking chair, rocking a toddler, and I saw tears rolling down Kay's face. I asked her what was wrong, and she could hardly speak, she was so upset. She said the toddler's parents had dropped him off before the early service and never came back. The poor baby had been there for almost 5 hours. The parents had not given a contact number. All Kay knew was the child's first name. I immediately called the youth pastor, who quickly turned around and came back into the church. The child was very out of sorts, either hungry or tired. We had snacks, but no food, and there really wasn't a place to put a kid down for a nap. I ran to get some chicken nuggets while they figured out what to do. When I got back, a couple had pulled right in front of me. They asked where everyone was, and I said church ended early. They said, "Okay, we're just here to pick up our son." I wasn't about to get involved with the drama, so I just unlocked the door and let them in. The youth pastor was livid and lit into them. It turns out the parents wanted some time alone and had been dropping their kid off at church and then leaving to go do stuff. They'd been doing this for weeks, just dropping him off at 7:45 a.m. and coming to pick him up around 12:45 p.m. Here's the part where the parents are really entitled. They got mad at the youth pastor for ending church early. They yelled at him for endangering their child and threatened to sue. The dad was up in the youth pastor's face, and I thought they might fight, but the youth pastor was a big dude, and I think that kept the dad from doing anything else. I didn't stay in there. I went into the next room with Kay and the child and gave him the nuggets, which he gulped down. The parents finally took the kid and left. The youth pastor and his wife took us to lunch because we, mostly Kay, were still upset by the whole thing. I think about that kid a lot. I hope his parents didn't abandon him. I wish I had a follow-up, but as far as I know, they never came back. It's not uncommon for people to, in a way, use church as childcare. Honestly, they just seem like kind of dim-witted and terrible parents. Our next story is by Ramen Noodles 620. Entitled Dad Wants Me to Subsidize His Trip to Europe. For background, my dad and I are currently no contact due to him being a controlling jerk my entire life and an incident earlier this year that pushed things over the edge. I am still in contact with my mother. I currently have a couple weeks off to spend time with my son, who is a few months old, before we start daycare. Usually around lunchtime, I go to my parents' place so my mom can spend time with her grandson. My dad is at work during the time I visit. During my most recent visit, my mom mentioned that my dad asked if I could pay $3,000 to fund his trip to Europe. He's going to the UK, France, and maybe somewhere else for a month later this year. We have family spread out in those countries, so he will be visiting and staying with family and friends. My mom is not going. It will actually be nice for her to have a staycation of sorts, since she won't have to be a maid and cook for a grown man for a month. I'm taking her to New York to stay with my aunt and cousins for a bit, where she can relax, and she will come back home with my cousins, who will stay for a couple weeks to hang out and visit where we live. My parents are lower middle class. They don't go on international trips on a normal basis, so this is a big treat. However, my parents live a very frugal lifestyle, so my dad has more than enough money to pay for this trip on his own. I know this because I literally have access to his bank account due to years basically managing their finances and paying bills online for him even when I was a kid. He does not need the money from me. He's simply asking because he's delusional and thinks his children owe him because he did the bare parental minimum of providing food, clothing, and shelter for us. He worked hard. We'll always give him credit for that. However, he thinks we owe him and should always do as he says. To be clear, my mom did not expect me to pay and was telling me more so I'm just informed of what's going on. I don't know, it sounds like you guys could use a break sending him away. He can pay for it on his own. It sounds like he's going to pay for it on his own. It's going to happen whether you pay or not, so I would just not pay. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a fantabulous day. I actually didn't know that fantabulous is a word until today. It's actually in the dictionary. I mean, if you think about it, that's how most words get invented anyway. Somebody just starts saying it, and then other people say it, and it spreads around, and then it's part of the vernacular. But I thought it was a fake word. I just looked it up. It's real. Maybe it's just always been one, and I didn't know.